thank you so much for joining us this evening for our 2023 Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership Lecture, honoring Senator Elizabeth Dole's legacy and women who break barriers, make significant contributions to their fields, and reach positions of leadership. As most of us are well familiar with Senator Elizabeth Dole's career and achievements, she was a number of firsts in her career. The first woman first woman to serve as the Secretary of Transportation, the first woman to serve in 2 presidential cabinets, first woman to serve as a president of the American Red Cross after Clara Barton, and first woman from North Carolina to serve as a U.S. Senator from that state. A lot of historic firsts. Our guest this evening is none other than Katie Sowers, who has a few firsts of her own to tell us about. Katie was, as some of us know, was the first woman to serve on an NFL coaching staff in 2022 at the Super Bowl when the Chiefs played the 49ers. Some of us remember that game.
And beat them. It's fine. You can say it. It's fine.
So, Katie, we're so pleased that you all can join us this evening for our conversation. Katie, I want to start by, let's just establish this real quick. You're a Kansan, which is wonderful, and we're so proud of you. What NFL team did you root for growing up?
Wow, this is so, first of all, beautiful audience. Wow. I mean, I'm looking out like, we're in Kansas. We are definitely in Kansas. Yeah, Dallas Cowboys. I'm sorry to say it. So
we had to get this out of the way.
There's a lot of 49ers fans out there. They hate the Cowboys. It was like I had to kind of be in the closet about who I used to cheer for, when I was growing up. But I remember I had this Christmas list. All I wanted was Dallas helmet, Dallas helmet, Dallas helmet. Like, why did I love the Cowboys? I have no idea. Literally no idea. I think it stems from, anyone seen The Little Giants? If you haven't, please watch it. I'm telling you, I mean, Icebox, we had a lot of players that would call me Icebox. Definite compliment, and in The Little Giants, the Cowboys were kind of the bad guys. But I remember seeing in that movie, all the kids wanted that matching jersey, those matching helmets. And I knew for me, loving football, all I wanted was to look around and see all these matching helmets, all these matching jerseys. And I honestly didn't know it was a reality. And I think that's why I really took to the Cowboys. To be on, and they were good. They were decent. But yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, Deion Sanders. Yeah, I'll tell you, when I was in elementary school, we had to do a presentation about somebody that we admire. It was like all the other young girls in my class did, like Little House on the Prairie. They wore their cute little dresses. I was Deion Sanders, and I remember this clearly. I was so proud of myself. I made this cigarette thing with my paper. I was like cutting, made it look like cigarettes because I read that he quit smoking. But then lo and behold, when I'm at the Super Bowl, I actually meet him and I told him that story and he told me he never smoked. I was like, my whole life has changed. It's changed. But long story short, it's the Cowboys. Not anymore, though.
So tell us a little bit about growing up in Kansas, and how did you get the idea that you wanted to play football? We didn't see any examples of women playing football.
So when I was young, I grew up in Heston, Kansas. If anyone knows where Heston is, the town that got hit by the tornado, many people know it by that. We have 2 stoplights, maybe more. We're growing. A lot of 4-way stops, but 2 stoplights that we were extremely proud of. That if you got stopped there, that was luck. Not many people got stopped at that stoplight. But grew up in that small Mennonite town. My grandpa was head of the Mennonite church. He was there as the president of Heston College. My mother was the director of nursing at Heston College, so a lot of strong ties in Heston. My dad was a basketball coach, women's basketball coach at Bethel College. Anyone knows where Bethel is. So that whole atmosphere that I grew up in was all centered around sports. And for me, football always was my love. If you look back, all these journal entries from when I was young, it talked about how much I look forward to after school going home and playing football with all the neighborhood boys. And I had this special technique when I tackled them. they did not like it. But I thought I was clever. I also thought I invented the belly flop, so that's a side note. But I would take their jersey and just spin them around and throw them down. And I will say a lot of them retired to be refs. They chose to ref. But that was kind of my upbringing, and I always saw my dad, he would always coach the women. We'd come to the practices. I remember they'd be running lines, and like when they'd get on like rep 10, I would join, like this little kid that's like, I'm gonna race you now after you're dead tired, and I'm gonna beat you and laugh, and I'm really annoying. I can't believe they handled me. I mean, I would have been so annoyed, but that whole atmosphere was what I was used to. And so for the longest time, I knew I wanted to either be a coach, a teacher, or a counselor. And I knew if like one of those was gonna be right, but I didn't know that coaching actually is all three. You teach, you coach, you counsel. I should probably go back and actually get a master's in social work or some mental health. I mean, that's just kind of, the needs of coaching. But I didn't realize that I could coach football when I was young. You don't know that you can do something until you see it. And even when I started playing tackle football, I never thought coaching football was an option. And looking back, I'm thinking, how did I miss it? But I missed it because it wasn't there. And a lot of what I learned was, I decided I'm gonna be a coach. I'm gonna keep track of all the things I like about coaches, all the things I don't like. So when I become a basketball coach, this all, kind of takes care of itself. And I quickly realized that we'll kind of get into some of the things that came up that turned my path from basketball to football. But it wasn't until I saw Becky Hammond actually coaching in the NBA, if anyone knows who Becky Hammond was. She's now in the WNBA, but she was coaching in the NBA, and I remember seeing it on TV. I vividly remember this. And a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, I could coach football. And I posted on my Instagram, NFL, I'm coming for you. And I remember without a doubt, I knew it was gonna happen. I would give these, for USA Football, I used to give presentations about, to all these youth coaches. And I remember telling them, next time you guys see me, I'm gonna be in the NFL. And they all thought it was a joke. And I was like, yeah, joke's on you, it's gonna happen. and so, yeah, it was kind of a random, rare upbringing in a small town of Kansas. And the amount of times I hear the joke, you're not in Kansas anymore, I'm so sick. I almost say it before, when I meet someone, I'm like, yeah, you're not in Kansas anymore, I get it. That whole joke. But, the small town upbringing, the sports background, it's crazy how life can put so many random pieces together that all just don't make sense at the time, but they make sense later. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm not the type of person that says everything that happens was meant to happen. I believe if you look through a lens of opportunity, if you believe that good opportunities can come from bad events, you are much more likely to see that door open than you are to just be staring at that door that was closed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So did you play organized football for your high school, or how did you get into playing football? Where were those opportunities for you?
So it started out Sunday dinner. I would call all the kids, and that's where my career started. But it wasn't until I was taking a victory lap in college. Anyone take a victory lap? You just have to finish a few credits, take another year. Victory lap. I like to call it my victory lap. But I was done playing basketball. I played 4 years of basketball, 2 years of track and field, a year of soccer, and a year of softball in college. I was extremely bored. But when I took my victory lap and I was done with my basketball career, I remember everyone always told me, build your resume, get experience. And so I was captain every year I was in college, and so I thought, what a great fit. I'm already still here. Why not become a volunteer assistant coach? And so when I approached my coach about, I know you guys need help, I would love to help you out, he emailed me and said, how about you come to the office to talk about this? And this was a Mennonite school that at the time did not allow anyone who was openly gay to come out at that school. It was a don't ask, don't tell type of situation. And so when I talked to him and he asked me to come in, he said, because of your lifestyle, you're no longer wanted around the team. And I remember him saying, it's nothing personal. And he gave me a hug. And I remember sitting there, and there was really nothing I could do. That was the reality I was living in. And I remember my mom's in the front row. I called my mom right away, and I was crying, and I told her about it. And she, her positive personality, it's fine, everything's going to be fine. And we hung up, and I remember she called me right back, and she was crying, and she said, it's not fine, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And that moment, I felt like my coaching career was done. I thought that everything I had planned, the journals I had created, developing, like what type of coach I wanted to be, I thought that wasn't for me anymore. And anyone who's been a former athlete, once you're done playing, you lose an identity, and you got to figure out, what is my identity? And so I remember, if it's not coaching, what is it? And I saw a clip of women playing tackle football, and all of a sudden my memories of when I was young and when I was dreaming of being in that Cowboys helmet and those matching uniforms, I saw this as an opportunity to change my path. And that's when I started playing for the West Michigan Mayhem in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I would finish with school in Goshen. It was like an hour and 15 minutes. We would travel. And then right when it got done, we'd travel right back, my twin sister and I. She'd pick me up from track practice. I would do high knees. And then she would pick me up, I would just leave practice. Do not tell any of my coaches. They probably wouldn't care. But that's what started it. And I played for 9 years, and before dislocating my hip. Wow. And really started my coaching journey after that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what was your first opportunity to coach tackle football?
So my first opportunity was not until I was actually coaching some 8th grade, mainly 8th grade boys. We actually did have a girl on our team. And that was my first taste of coaching, and I knew I loved it. I took this team that, from everything I had known, they were not a very good program in terms of, they were not proud to be that feeder school to I won't name the high school, because you guys know all the high schools around here. But we ended up winning it all. And I remember looking over at these old school coaches on the other sideline. They were so mad to be, getting their you-know-what kicked by a woman. Not only that, but I was no longer doing the standard, all wing T for anyone, that knows football. We were a spread offense, no huddle, all the signals. So, here I am on the sideline, like, and then it's like touchdown. That's all that mattered. And I knew from that moment I had to continue this coaching thing. I was a general manager for our women's tackle football team, and also the quarterback. Maybe a little conflict of interest. I remember
many hats, many helmets.
Yeah, I remember I was the offensive coordinator, general manager, and quarterback. And I remember there was this blitz that just came screaming through. I just got annihilated. And I remember looking at my lineman, I was like, get out! And then I'm like, wait, it's probably not the move you should do. But there were some crazy times when I first started my journey, and it's amazing to see how it's evolved.
Uh-huh. So talk a little bit about the transition from a player on the field to a coach on the sideline. What was that like, or what changes in your perspective with that?
I've always seen myself, I was a coach's kid. I think there's something special about someone who can not only play a sport, but then there's that skill to actually understand how to communicate that skill. Not everybody knows how to directly communicate that skill, and I think when I was a player, I was a twin. I am still a twin. I'm a twin. Oh, I am still a twin. And for those of you who don't know, I grew up in my twin sister's shadow. I mean, it was a constant. I remember the first time I talked to a newspaper. It was funny. I was called out of school, which that's typical Kansas. Call them out of school to talk to sports, like to a newspaper. That's odd. But I remember first I said, me? Like, are you sure they don't mean my sister? And they're like, no, they want to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, cool. What? They might think I'm good. And then I got to the phone, and I remember them saying, we're doing this article on twins, and we want to know how it feels to be in your twin sister's shadow. This is a true story, you guys. I mean, these people are real. They have, I don't know where their moral code is, but I remember just kind of taking it. I'm like, I'm her biggest fan. But see, this is the thing. You get me on these. You guys don't let me tell these stories. I get off topic. You want me to keep going?
But I did want to say, do you have a podcast? Because I heard like sibling podcasts are kind of a thing.
Oh, we're starting one.
All right, there you go.
I don't know if it'll be good or funny or brilliant or a disaster. Could be all of those. Yeah. But, that whole me living in the shadow made me a better coach, in my opinion. I had a chance to really continually reflect on the details, the skills. I knew that it wasn't going to come easy to me. Even though the outside world thought I was an above average player, to me, I was still not as good as Liz. And I remember I was at a thrift store. My mom loves thrift stores, She hates that I said that. But we were there, and one of her friends was there, and I remember him saying, now, are you the good one or the bad one?
Oh.
And I was like, is that a joke? But I'm the bad one, probably, of what you're referring to. But that living a life where you're constantly compared, some people can say it was something that really tore you down. I see it as something that made me work even harder, to be a better coach, to be a better communicator, to figure out how I could best teach myself to be better, but then also communicate that to others. So I think the biggest thing for me was really just taking all the things that I had going on in my head on a daily basis and actually applying it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, Katie, so now you're coaching tackle football. What happens between your first coaching gig and the NFL? How do you get there?
A lot of chance, a lot of fate. So random story, I was actually working for the city of Kansas City. I was the athletic director for the Parks and Recreation. So Parks and Recreation, that was me. Yeah, I've never seen that show, but I heard it's funny. Maybe I should watch it. But I remember, I was just working day in, day out, and I knew I still wanted to coach, but I thought, coaching meant I had to be a PE teacher, and I didn't want to be a PE teacher. And so I was just really kind of trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. But I saw a position open up where they were going to pay someone to coach youth basketball. And I don't know if where you guys grew up, if that's a normal thing. It was not normal to see that. I'm like, I am sold. Sign me up. I was supposed to coach the 6th grade girls basketball team. And I remember getting a phone call, and the athletic director, she was extremely sorry. She's like, I messed up the schedule. I totally put you down with the 5th graders. Is this okay? And I was like, I don't know the difference between a 5th grade girl and a 6th grade girl. I literally could not tell you the difference. So you could have told me these were 8th graders, and I would have been like, cool. I had no idea. And so, I just said, that's great. I'm gonna go to work, and I'm gonna be the best 5th grade girls basketball. They are gonna know how to jump stop. They're gonna know how to pivot on time. They are gonna be the hardest workers. And I attacked that job like that. But I never knew that would be the fate that took me to the NFL, because on that team was Scott Pioli, former general manager for the Chiefs. His daughter was on that team. And it wasn't going to be until about 3 or 4 years later that I would actually get my first job opening with the Atlanta Falcons, which was where Scott then went to be an assistant general manager. And so one thing I want to make sure I mention, a lot of people talk about networking. They talk about the importance of relationships. Relationships are long-term investments. And I want everyone to remember that when you're networking, that networking gets such a bad name, but these relationships, if you're looking for someone to do something for you quick, it's not going to happen, right? If your intentions are good, you really want to actually just be someone that gets to know what really drives someone, what's their why. Those long-term relationships will open up opportunities, I promise you that. And the important thing is, how do you water those relationships? Do you continue to check in, or is it just too much for you? Because if it's too much, I get it, but you're also missing out on a lot of opportunities that you never know who is in that room that could change your life. You literally never know. I didn't know when I walked into that basketball gym that gym was going to change my life, that those girls were going to change my life, that young girl that was a 5th grade basketball player is now graduated from college, and I still keep in touch with her, and her dad is a great mentor and friend to me, and he's continued to mentor me and really serve as kind of a second father figure in my life. Mm-hmm. And so one thing I hope you guys get out of this is you honestly, you never know who is going to change your life, where someone might change your life. So regardless of what job it is that you're doing, if you have to pick up trash, that's everybody's job. You don't know who's watching you that knows the details that you care about. There's no job too big, no job too small. When I was with the Niners, I actually started doing WAG. NFL coaches don't make a ton of money right away, right? So I actually stopped when I ended up going to one of our players that was on IR's house to walk his dog. That was extremely awkward when I'm like, I'm here to walk your dog. But I always say, you're never too cool to walk someone else's dog. And I think a lot of, especially now, we have so many people that just want that quick dream job. Well, this is not what I want. I'm going to wait for the best thing. I'm telling you, every single job I had played a role in who I am today, whether it be an admissions counselor at UMKC, whether it be over the Parks and Rec of the athletic fields, a 5th grade girls basketball coach. All of those pieced together to really create the opportunity that opened up. And I think, there's so many different ways you can view that. To me, I like to view it as an opportunity. And I think if you have that mindset, it really changes the lens in which you view the world.
Mm-hmm. So you're on the coaching staff of the Falcons.
Yep.
You're coaching men. All your colleagues are men. It's a game for men. The whole universe is men. Tell us about that, Katie.
Yeah, so I got to the NFL, and it's interesting. I'd never even been to an NFL game, but my first NFL game was actually coaching on the sideline.
Wow.
Against the then Washington Redskins at the time. It was crazy because I went in, and there's so many people that a lot of you might have wondered, how do the players treat you? I did wonder, how are they going to treat me? I'm a woman, they're men. And when I got there, I realized just how wrong I was if I even thought one of them might question who I am, what I know. Those men are young professionals. Their job is on the line every single day. There is a line of hundreds and hundreds of people looking to take their place. If you are there and you can truly help them, you can get them to where they want to go, they don't care who you are. Julio Jones, anyone know who Julio Jones is? My 30th birthday was when I first started with the Falcons. I was in training camp, and I remember Julio was the guy. He would always kind of stand by me. I felt like we kind of shared this connection. He was quiet. I was quiet at the time. I'm not really quiet, but I was just kind of, watching and learning. And I remember my birthday came around, and it was so weird. Julio hadn't said happy birthday to me. And I'm not the type that's like, when are you going to tell me happy birthday? But this day I did. It was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were in a receivers meeting, and I was like, Julio, you going to tell me happy birthday? I'm literally 30 years old. And he just gives me this look. I kid you not, a minute later, the equipment manager comes in with a cake that he had ordered that morning that said, happy 30th birthday, Katie. And so that alone, I remember thinking, you have one of the best in the NFL. He's not only showing me that I'm valuable, he's leading an example to all these rookies that are looking and saying, he respects her, we should probably do the same. And so, some of those players are some of my biggest advocates, but that's where I met Kyle Shanahan, who was the offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Anyone watch that Patriots game versus the Falcons? Yeah, it was when I was with the Falcons. 28-3, and then we turned it around just to lose. But who wants to win a Super Bowl in their first year, right?
There's nowhere to go
I was
from
like,
there.
you know what? This is great. This is actually good because what would I strive for after this? You don't want that. It was awful. But 99% chance of winning doesn't happen. But isn't that life? We all have this picture-perfect idea of how life is going to go, and more often than not, it's not how it ever goes. But it's beautiful in its own way, right? And I think that's what I really gained out of that. But I met Kyle, and he became the head coach of the Niners, mm-hmm. and I was considered a safe woman. Take that as you know. They were able to talk around me, I guess. But that really, they saw my work ethic. They saw how great I was as a communicator, as a teacher, because that's what this is. I played the game, but a lot of people don't even know that. Can I communicate? Can I teach? You don't need a certain chromosome to be able to teach football. You really don't. And I found a bunch of people who really believed in me, and again, nurturing those relationships, those networks, and that's what ultimately took me to San Francisco.
Mm-hmm. You told us earlier about how coming out as gay negatively impacted your career at your college, but you joined the NFL and you are the first openly gay coach to coach in the NFL anywhere.
Yeah.
Did that change your dynamic with the players, or how did that identity affect your experience?
Yeah, so a lot of people, when I do a lot of these speaking events, and one of the common themes is, how hard was it to be openly gay in the NFL? And if I'm going to be honest, it was actually easier, because it's not necessarily the fear of gay people. It's this fear of feminism. It's anything that, if you look at the game of football, they're now starting to get rid of the language, you hit like a girl, you're too soft. Everything that we stereotypically refer to women is everything negative about a football player, right? And so that whole dynamic and the way that we talk is critical in terms of, let me tell you a story. Okay, I'm sorry, here we go again. I'm just gonna do it. Do you guys know the value of what you tell our young people? I know you do that. Yeah. Let me tell you this story. So my niece, Clara, for anyone that knows Clara, stereotypical girl, pink, everything, pink, 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 goes out of her way to tell me how much she hates football. Like, I get it, writes it everywhere she can when she's at the house. I hate football. You're not hurting me by doing that. That's just how she is. She wants to be a dancer, maybe a president, maybe a teacher, maybe Taylor Swift. Either way, that's kind of who she is. But when she was about 4 years old, we were driving around, and I remember there was some kids playing football, some little boys, and we were just trying to point it out to her. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to see football. And she looks and stops. We're like, Claire, look at the boys. And she stops and says, boys don't play football. And what I realized was that everything she had seen was my twin sister and I playing tackle football. And even though she hated it, she knew it was not her game, she honestly believed that only women play football. And so I remember the Minnesota Vikings were playing, and she's like, now, KK, is that a boys' team or a girls' team? And anyone know the Lizzo song, like New Man on the, she thought it was No Man on the Minnesota Vikings, which made complete sense to her. So like all these things were lining up that this is just a women's game. But it hit me just how important it is. I didn't realize that I was only showing my niece that only women play football. I didn't think I had to elaborate that boys play as well. But be mindful of the things, when there's a football game on, are you just asking your son, or are you also giving an opportunity to your daughter to come watch as well? And I find myself sometimes, we have a nephew that he's really into sports. He's the one that just loves every sport. And sometimes I'm quick to just say, oh, we should invite Sam. How about we invite Clara, Sam, and Quinn? Because who knows what they're going to love. They're young. They don't have any idea. Allow them to see it all. And I think that's one thing, if there's anything you guys get out of this, reflect on the biases that you have, the unconscious bias, because we are we are in the way of equality, every single one of us, when it comes to that. It's the language that we use daily. When we talk about coaches, do we default to him? When we talk about sports, when we talk about lawyers, are we picturing a man? Doctors, are we picturing a man? We need to check ourselves, because once we can realize that we all have room for growth, I think we'll see an enormous jump in the way society views women in this field and in all career fields, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was such an interesting point you made when you were communicating about your experience with the players and their professionalism. Did you have the same kind of sense of equality or authority with your cohort, your leadership cohort there?
That's where it got a little bit different. I do feel like when it comes to a man's world, there is this assumption that if you're a man, it's assumed you know something until you prove you don't. Whereas a woman, it's assumed you don't know something until you prove you do. And I think I had a lot of that. I had a lot of people that resented me being a woman. I remember hearing, must be nice. Must be nice. And I'm like, must be nice to be the son of someone working on the team. Must be nice. But I did feel a lot of resentment, and for the longest time, I was actually the only coach that didn't sit first class on team trips. And it wasn't until my last year that I remember I was sitting on the plane. The plane ride before the season prior, we had headed to Miami for the Super Bowl, and we learned that Kobe Bryant died on the plane. And this next trip, when we were headed to New York, found out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. And I remember looking around, looking for someone to share our sadness. And no one even knew who she was, let alone was I the only coach sitting in the back. And I think that was a moment where it hit me that, I'm okay if I'm not in the NFL. It doesn't, that's not what makes me who I am. And it was a hard thing to deal with, but I hope that my experience makes it so that other women don't have to feel that. I have so many journal entries where I remember putting my hood up, just tears coming down my face, feeling so alone, so isolated, because I did feel that there were a lot of men around me that saw me as a threat, that thought if a team's looking for a token woman, they're going to pass me up. And to them, that was unfair. And so, talking with some of the female officials in the league, a similar thing is the same issue. It's not the players, it's actually the people you work with every day that really are the ones that struggle to see your worth. And I think, the thing that you have to remember is a lot of that is insecurity within themselves. The most confident people that I've ever met are the least threatened by me, and they're the most likely to raise me up. It's the ones that have the weak links that they try to hide that also try to bring me down, because it's just it's a reflection of who they are. So I think, if anyone's facing that, I'm sure a lot of people have gone through that, are going through that. just remember that it's more of a reflection of who they are than who you are.
So ultimately, how long did you coach in the NFL, and is your position at Ottawa, was that immediately following the NFL?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So I was in the NFL for 5 years, and it was crazy. So I have a lot of Ottawa University folks in attendance. I'm so happy that they came. But that's another, random series of events that opened the door. So when I was in the NFL, well, actually, it was just right before I got in the NFL. I was in that building my resume phase. And I remember thinking, okay, I want to get some football coaching experience because I saw Becky Hammon in the NBA, and I got to get my football experience so I can show that I can coach in the NFL. And I remember I need to look up who has a female athletic director. So I started looking around. Sure enough, Ottawa did. There are not too many out there. And I reached out to her, and I said, can I come by, watch the tackle football team, just get some experience so I can put it on my resume, really learn the game. Nothing ended up ever happening. She responded, we had great conversations, but I ended up going to the NFL. About 5 years later, I get an email, and this was right in the time where my dad had suffered a major stroke, and my twin sister was actually a full-time caregiver for my dad at that time. And, I remember talking to her at that time, and she was crying to me, and she said, I love helping the family, but as my twin sister, you living this quote-unquote dream world in the front page of the newspaper, and here I am, not sure where my career's going. I'm just taking care of my dad full-time. And I remember her saying, I really would love to get more into the flag football world. She was a former USA flag football player. And about a week or two later, I get an email from Araby. I still happened to have that same personal email that I had emailed her years before. And she said, do you happen to know anyone in the Kansas City area that would want to coach flag football? Because we're starting a flag football program. And I said, you know what, actually I do. And I remember going to my twin sister, and she was so low at the time. She was just extremely lost. It was hard to even motivate her to respond to the email. I remember I actually faked like I was Liz, like, hey, sorry, I've been busy babysitting the kids, making something here she is actually saying, this is not true. This is not going to happen. It's not. She didn't believe it. We've been told so many times that football was going to happen for women, and it never did. But that opportunity of me reaching out, and it had nothing to do with flag football. It was me reaching out for the betterment of myself, but that connection led to my twin sister becoming the head coach of Ottawa University. And so when my last year ended in California, I remember I was going to come and just watch a practice. I remember telling Liz, hey, when's your game start? She's like, Katie, we have a game this week. I'm like, what? And I remember I'm just going to come to practice. I'm going to watch. I came to a practice, and I could not leave. I mean, these were some of the most passionate women I've ever seen in my life. In June, in a pandemic, they found out that flag football was an opportunity. They dropped everything they were doing from Vegas, from Florida, never been to Kansas. They came to Ottawa, Kansas to start their flag football journey. So what a crazy series of events that really just came together to create where I am right now, which I feel like is a dream job, getting to argue with my twin sister every day and act like we're playing Madden against each other. I'm like, Liz, you knew I was going to run that defense. No, I didn't, Katie. The girls love it. They love it. It's literally like an episode of The Office every single day. If you ever watch The Office, it's a great show. Might have to just start a documentary with my twin sister and I, talk about comedy. It might happen. You never know. It might. Twinning and winning.
I want to talk more about Ottawa, but you mentioned something about the media attention that you got. What was that like, and how did that change your experience doing your job?
Yeah. So I remember, when the first article that really went viral was when Outsports came to me and they're like, is it okay that we say that you're in a relationship? I was in a relationship at the time. I didn't know that they were going to come out and say first gay coach in pro sports. And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, why not? My parents know. I'm not afraid to tell anybody. It's fine. And then all of a sudden I remember waking up and just seeing my phone just blowing up. And, it was a really crazy feeling. But one of the coolest things that happened because of that, I remember players that would stop by my office and just tell me, I read that article, that's so cool. I have an uncle, I have a, friend, this, that, the other, I have a brother. Hey, do you know any gay bars in San Francisco? My brother's gay. Like, those conversations started to take place. And, a lot of people say it shouldn't talk about your sexuality. It's not talking about sexuality, it's allowing people to know who you are. If I'm coaching with, a man and he has a wife, he can put a picture of him and his wife up and have an open conversation. And it allows me to get to know who he is. What does he do when he goes home? Because if you don't wonder those things, do you really care about people? Do you really know who you're working with? Who you are, life or death in the NFL? Who are these people that you're working with? And so I think for me, it was a sense of, I really get to have these conversations where I'm authentic, where they can better trust who I am as a person because they know this is me. And so I think that was the most important thing that came of it. But the media attention was nuts, to be honest. I remember at the Super Bowl, there was opening night, and they didn't want me to have any individual press conferences because typically low-level coaches don't get that much attention. And so they actually made a rule that none of the assistant coaches would have interview sessions, just to make sure that the media didn't come to me. So on opening night, I didn't even get a podium because I was still quality control. And it was like a media frenzy on the ground around me. And I don't think it's something that helps a career path when you have a lot of people who already think you get too much special attention. It's too easy because you're just a woman. You must have it made. And so I think a lot of, not allowing the media to talk to me as much was more of saving the target on my back, trying to keep it as small as possible. But you can only do that for so long, and that target kind of makes itself. But that's the world we live in. That's one thing that I learned is just how important it is that we support other women. Women support women. We have men that support women that see these little things, because you don't know who's saying I believe in you to someone. And that can be the most important thing they ever hear. If someone hadn't told me, I believe that you could be a coach in the NFL, Scott Pioli, I probably would have given up a lot sooner. But when someone tells you, you're good at this, I believe, like, you have something, don't assume people know, because you'll regret that when you lose that chance to tell them that.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit a couple of weeks ago. You talked about some of the challenges in establishing a new sports program, a new flag football program. Can you tell us about that process and how's that gone for you?
Still going.
Well, you've won 3 national championships.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, flag football is not just a rec intramural sport. It is now officially an Olympic sport in 2028. It will be in LA. And it's been huge because, a lot of times people don't associate the game of football with women. And there are a lot of young girls that dream of throwing that football around just like the boys. And you see it even more now that they actually see that it's an opportunity for them. And so when Ottawa, being the trailblazer that Ottawa is, being one of the first groups to really start that flag football program, the NFL was really behind it, and so that was a helpful push. But all these women, like I was saying, from Vegas, from all over, who just truly loved the game. There was no big NIL deal. There was no big scholarship. There was no fancy, whatever the D1 programs. It was truly for the love of the game. And so for me to come from a place where, it was someone complaining between, I'm getting 12 million, why am I not 14 million? To seeing that, then to, how am I going to pay my student loan debt? That's what I can get on board with. And so for me, as hard as it was to build that program, when you have people that love the game that much, it makes life a dream. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we have won 3 championships. It hasn't been easy. And I remember this, so after we won the first championship, you already have a target on your back, right? Anything you do, if you don't win, you lose. And so I remember we went to Florida early on in the season, and we got smashed. I mean, it was 33-0 one game. And I remember coming back, how do you look at a team that's the defending national champions and you got embarrassed? And I remember thinking, wow, how are we gonna do it again? But what we ended up figuring out is that the narrative was just different. We actually, I'm friends with Jill Ellis, for anyone who knows Jill Ellis, great, former USA national team coach for the soccer program. And she's like, can I talk to your team? And so she actually Zoom called in with her, great quotes and the mountaintop and all this stuff. And she's an amazing person. But I remember her saying, you know what? I love this narrative for you guys. Because you know what? You saw their best. They didn't see yours. What a great position to be in. And, before you were defending, you're not defending anymore, you're attacking. And that simple change of mindset, which can apply to so many different parts of our life, if we can apply the mindset, you know what, we didn't get embarrassed. We could have easily folded. Most teams would have. But we got this group to believe that this narrative was actually beneficial. And we ended up winning, beating all the teams that we lost to on that horrid trip to Florida. We won. And so at the end of the day, those losses were actually great fuel to build the narrative of who we are and who we're going to become. And so after we did it a second time, there's no way we can do it a third. This is going to be tough. Sure enough, third time, it came down to 3 different fourth and inches for all the other team had to do a score. We stopped them. There was a penalty, there was another penalty, and we stopped them again. Mm-hmm. End of the game, championship, Ottawa. And so when that first national championship happened, I remember we were in the Atlanta Falcons Stadium, which is like a full circle moment. Here I am back in Atlanta, but I'm not walking through the tunnel with the men that I'm used to. I'm walking with these women that love this game just as much. And I remember that buzzer went off and we won the first ever national championship that I knew was gonna be a big deal someday. Might not be a big deal to a lot of people right now, but I know these women, we're gonna read about them. They're the ones remember back in the day when this, that, whatever, that's them. And so when I think that moment in my career was probably better than any Super Bowl I ever attended.
You told me a story about how you were researching strategy, or you're trying to develop some strategy. That was such an interesting perspective on yourself. Would you tell that story again?
Yeah, so flag football is, it was pretty new to me coming in from the tackle world. And I remember I was looking up, what other teams do. And I remember I was trying to look online, trying to find, okay, I'm going to take over the defense. I got to figure out what's the best sevens defense. So I'm looking through all these online articles, okay, someone give me something. There's not much of anything right now on flag football. And I remember after about 2 hours of just kind of looking through everything, I'm like, wait a second. I've learned from some of the brightest minds in the game of football. I'd like to say I'm pretty creative. Why do I not just build my own defense? And so what I ended up doing is I screw all this stuff that's on the internet. I don't like it. It's not for us. I ended up just using everything I learned in the NFL and applying it, because it not only helped me learn the game, I had to figure out how does this translate? How do I make this applicable for sevens flag football? And so our offense now has a lot of Niners language. So it's fun, when the players are actually watching some of these NFL games, they'll hear some of the same language we use in our play calls. Even though it's sevens, it's still football. And so a lot of those things we built into the scheme that we created. And I would like to say I think I have the best defense out there. I have some Florida coaches asking me to teach it to them, and I'm like, that's good. Well played. I'll teach you, but I'll leave a few things out.
Don't give them the full
No.
recipe. So you mentioned this is so exciting that flag football will be in the Olympics in 2028. Will there be men's and women's teams?
Yep.
Okay.
And I think one important thing to recognize is that flag football is not the female version of tackle football. There's women, a lot of women's leagues, about probably 80 plus teams around the country of women that play tackle football literally for the love of the game. They have full-time jobs and then will go play football on top of that. Flag football is an art. It has both men and women's teams that will represent the USA. I might be representing a different country. I'm not going to say which one it might be, but might be one of those. If anyone was looking to do a documentary, going to beat the USA might be the title. If you guys want to pick that up, possibly. Any filmmakers? No. But yeah, it's. Seeing that in the Olympics, there's so many times these young boys get a dream of going to the NFL. That's what they can dream of working for. And for so long, women didn't really have that opportunity to dream. And with the Olympics, how many times I dreamt as a child of representing your country on the world stage. To hear a team across from you speaking a different language, I think that there's something beautiful about that. And so hearing that it's now in the Olympics, especially when Olympics are brought to LA, there's no other perfect time to really show the world just how fascinating this game is.
Mm-hmm. Is that equality for you? The definition of equality as regards to football or success for women in football, what does that look like? Is this it or is it?
Success is no longer seeing headlines of a woman being the first. As important as it is to highlight these things, I think the moment I stop hearing about the firsts, it means that we've found success. Because a woman coaching men should not be something that's just crazy. I remember I was invited to watch the KC Ballet, and I remember, I don't know anything about ballet, so like their practice, recital, rehearsal, I have no idea. I was watching. They were working on the Nutcracker. And I remember the director was a man, but this was predominantly women. And I was thinking, what would happen if I went up and said, do the women respect you? Mm-hmm. Do the women listen to you? How do they treat you? How did they receive you when you got in? The same questions that I'm used to every single day. But we don't even consider asking a man that in what we consider more of a woman's world. And so I think that there's this, again, unconscious bias that literally every single one of us has that tells us what power is, what leadership is. And oftentimes it looks and resembles a man. And I think the more that we can be aware of that, the more we can actually stop that and actually see the world for what it is.
We have a wonderful crowd here, and I know there are probably lots of questions out there. I'm going to ask Katie one question, then I'm going to turn it over to you guys. So be thinking and be ready, and we'll have students with the microphone. Katie, you mentioned Barbara Hammond and as being an inspiration to you, and Scott Pioli as being a mentor to you. Were there any other folks in your life that you looked to for mentorship or that helped you out?
I'm going to go ahead and say the cheesy answer. This is not just because my mom's here, but, growing up in such a small, very conservative town, I knew for a long time I was different. And I knew I had loving parents, but I remember there were times I didn't even think I'd ever tell my mom who I was, because I just couldn't see a day that I felt comfortable being out in the little town of Heston, because I knew it'd be all they talked about, right? Whether that was true or not. But my mom, I think, was someone who, I always say if I'm half the person she is, I'll know I'm successful. But this unconditional love that I've felt from my mom is something that I don't take for granted. I did for a while. I used to think every mom was like this. I learned quickly that was not the case. I thought that every mom said for Christmas she just wants her kids to be happy. But the most important thing that I feel like she ever taught me, and something that I take with me, is, this world that we live in is so divided. It's like, pick this side, pick that side. You're either right or you're wrong. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and I said, what do you do in times like how do you know what side to be on? And I remember my mom said, the most important thing, if you use love as a measuring stick, and you always plan to err on love, you can't go wrong, because I'd rather be wrong for being too loving than wrong for being too judgmental. And that's something that I continue to this day. It helps me make decisions. Which one, if I truly don't have an answer book to this life, which none of us do, what am I more okay with? Being that person that was maybe a little too loving, or a person that shut a lot of people down for things that didn't even impact me, right? And so, for that and for many other things, I think my mom is definitely my inspiration in terms of just the way she cared for my dad when he was dying. He went from winning a golf tournament to not being able to walk or talk. And I remember them talking about they were getting ready to travel the world. My mom had finally retired, years after she should have. And they were living their best life. And things can change in an instant, you guys. I think we all know that, but do we know it? And I want you all to think about everything you have in your life, your friends, your annoying dog. For me, I have naked cats, annoying naked cats. Think, all those things that maybe kind of annoy you, but you have. I want you guys to think about that, and then think about the moment you lose all of it. You literally wake up and everything you had, your parents, your kids, your job, your car, all of it's gone. All right, now picture that next day you got all of it back. I promise you that next day would be the best day of your life. But what changed? It was not that anything you got changed. It was the way in which you viewed what it is that you had. And so if we start to just realize that this is literally a scoreboard clicking down a clock to 0, but we don't know what the time is for anybody. My dad didn't know he was going to win a golf tournament and then literally never be able to walk or talk again. And I wish I had known that. I might have picked up the phone a little bit more. And so I promise you guys, if you're questioning whether, should I pick up the phone, should I go and do it, you can't regret that. I'll get off my soapbox.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I know we've got some great questions out there. Raise your hand. We'll pick you. All right. Allie here.
And you guys can ask me anything. Just fantasy football, I might overthink it,
Hi, thank you so much for being here. So we are at the Dole Institute of Politics, and there's a lot of debate over whether or not politics should be brought into sports. And you've mentioned how policies like the Don't Ask, Don't Tell have factored into your personal experience as an athlete. So I was just wondering how you saw politics relating to sports in today's political arena.
Yeah, the reality is you can't get away from politics, regardless. It's not just playing sports. Because at the end of the day, we live in this world where we have to coexist with people. Our happiness depends on the connections that we make, not the end score of the game. So for me, the politics part is this bigger dynamic of us needing to decide that you're wrong and I'm right. And so for me, politics plays into sports because it teaches you to listen if you actually use it correctly, regardless of what party, regardless of what policy you believe. Do you listen? Or do you just work on your defense for how you're right? How many of us actually sit down and say, you know what? I want to hear what you have to say. Like, I would love to see, some big pro-gun rally and then have the exact opposite somewhere else, and then all of a sudden have these speakers come that are literally the exact opposite of who they are on both sides. Those are the people that need to hear the other side, not because they might be wrong, but because if they truly believe what it is that they think, they would be more than happy to listen, because it not only strengthens your case if in fact you are what you believe to be on the right side of history, right? It not only strengthens it, but it also allows you to not just believe everything that you've grown up believing. The world is a lot different than we once thought. The lens that we saw the world through when we were little, and that we just kind of, we have all these little things that play into the lens. Those little things become big things, and views change. The lens in which we see the world changes. And so, to me, politics is always going to be a part of it. I think that there's politics in talking about politics. But for me, I think the most important thing is, regardless of where you sit, listen. Because someone just like you believes that they are right just as much as you do. And I know I've spent my whole life trying to tell people, like, I really want you to see, I know you don't believe that gay marriage is right, but I would really love for you to hear me and get to know me. And I owe them nothing but the same, right? Regardless of what side you think you sit on. I know that when I told my parents, as loving as they were, there was a transition. There was this, being a director of nursing at a school at the time that didn't also allow gay people to be out. That, how was she going to go to work? Those are things that I have to be aware of, and to actually care and understand that no one's just going to jump and at the drop of a hat say, I see your side. It's built. It's constant communication, understanding, and empathy. That's all politics is, in my opinion. I know it's definitely not that in the real world, but that's the fluffy rainbow and version of it.
Other questions?
What progress have you seen then in the NFL, Katie, as far as leadership and opportunities for women?
Yeah, so when I first started in the NFL, I remember, anyone who watches the Combine, it's a pretty big deal that happens every year. And I remember the first year I was there, I did not see one other female. The things that we went through at the train station, at the constant interviews that we had with all the players, all these things that in the NFL world, it's like, everybody knows about it. I was the only woman that knew about it. But then I remember, a couple years later when I went to the Combine, there was maybe 2 women I'd see, and I'd be like, I don't know if they felt the same when they see me, but I'd be like, family? Like, look at you. And then the last year I went to the Combine, filled with women. So to be able to see that, and I just saw, like, over the past 5 years, I think the full-time jobs of women in the NFL have grown 200+%. I mean, it's crazy. And when I first started with the Falcons, we had an intern that was an athletic trainer. They'd never even had an intern that was a female as an athletic trainer at that time. And that was when I was starting coaching with the Falcons. Then, lo and behold, it's a norm now on TV when you're watching and you see the athletic trainers run out with the water. You always see women. Never in, 5 years ago, that would have been crazy to see, and now it's the norm. So it's been really cool to see the progress. We have a long way to go, nowhere near even close to perfect, but we're getting there.
Thank you. We have one up here.
I had to write it down to make sure I got it right. So in sports, particularly the NFL, losing can be a very loud experience. As a leader, particularly a female leader, how do you manage big losses and show up for yourself and your team at work the next day?
Yeah. Man, one of the biggest things that I realized when working in the NFL is a loss is not just a loss. It means your quality of life is going down. That everybody at work the next day is in a bad mood because they're close to losing their jobs. That's just the way it is. And I remember actually my twin sister, I don't think my mom knows this, but slapped one of her friends at a Seattle Seahawks game after the Seahawks beat us because they didn't realize that this is more than a game. And so for those of you who don't know, right, this was the year prior to the Super Bowl. We started out 0-9. I guess this was 2 years prior. We were 0-9 my first year there. And I think people forget about that. I'm telling you, that was the most dreadful 0-9 experience. But we ended that year on a 6-game winning streak. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that I got out of that was, Kyle found a way to continue to make these guys believe they had a chance. I would watch in the way that he would watch game film and create the narrative, right? Life is about how do you create this narrative of what it is that we see. And he created this narrative that they didn't beat us, we beat ourselves. Every game, he found a way to show the film and tell the story that put this game into a different perspective. And I would say a lot of what I learned when the second year at Ottawa, when we got our butts kicked, I went back to that moment. As a coach, as a leader, you have to find a way to get them to believe. Because if you don't stand a chance. So going 0-9 in the NFL, and then seeing that progression of that same team then make it to the Super Bowl to lose to the dang Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I learned a lot from, how do we continue to get this team to believe when all the odds are against them? And so I think a lot of those experiences with those losses not only taught me that, man, this life in professional sports is hard, because winning and losing is not a fantasy football game. It's literally the difference between if I enjoy my job or if I don't, and if everybody is in the worst mood every single day, because that is the reality. You live not knowing what tomorrow holds, and that's a scary place to be. So losing is a lot different in those realms, but you learn how to really fix that narrative to be a lens in which is really beneficial for the team and can really build them up. And it ended up, a Super Bowl where we lost. But, hopefully next time, if I'm ever in that position again, which I doubt that I want to be, because I think flag football is it. But if I ever got a chance at the Super Bowl, I think I'd win. 0-2 is not my thing. Or maybe it is. Maybe that's what the pattern's telling me. It's either me or Kyle, I'm not sure.
Other questions for Katie?
Yeah, years ago, I'm old enough to remember when things were obviously a lot different. The other day, or fairly recently, my daughter that still lives at home and I were watching the Boston Celtics, and the commentators, the play-by-play people, one was Doris Burke and the other, I think, was Beth Mullins. But anyway, it was two women, that were doing the play-by-play deal. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But anyway, my question actually is, there are people, which I wonder if you've met, like Kim Mulkey,
Never met her.
or I don't know, just any of them. I can't think of names right now. But that we maybe would see on TV sometimes do the coaching or commentating and stuff.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's awesome that you recognize that. I think a lot of people go about their day with the details and don't think about the fact that every time they hear a sports game or watch a sports game on TV, it's typically always men that talk about it, right? And now you're seeing more and more women that are great at what they do. They are powerful. They are articulate. They know the game like an absurd amount. I mean, they are more than qualified. And I think we're starting to realize that the pool in which we pick these people who are going to lead these broadcasts, we don't just have to pick from half the population. We actually have a whole population, men, women, because I'm telling you, when a young girl watches that, she might say, that woman, I could be her one day. And now all of a sudden you start to see more and more women that are striving to get in the sports field. Same with women in coaching. I mean, how many of you guys know, all these different women's sports teams that are coached by men? And I'm not saying that these men are not great coaches. I'm just saying we need to put a priority in allowing our women who deserve and are qualified to lead our women, because those young girls start to look and say, I could be her. Because if you're a man and you've played all, sports your whole life, imagine that all of your coaches were women. I guarantee you wouldn't think that was a spot for you, right? And so just seeing someone who looks like you, I have a whole team of future coaches that I hope don't beat me. But we have a whole team that is just, they are ready to be coaches, and they're coming out of college at the right time because all these schools that are adding flag football. And women want to do it. There's this idea that women are just not interested. Women just haven't seen the opportunity. You're going to go to where you think that you're fit, that you're qualified. If you don't see it, you don't know that you're qualified. And the more we see it, the more we're going to realize that we're really changing a lot of these young girls' lives by allowing them the opportunity to do something that they've always loved.
All right, yeah, we had a question up here in the front.
Thank you, Katie. Really interesting. Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years?
That's a great question. In 5 years, that would be winning a gold medal in LA. I don't know what country it'll be for, winning a gold medal. I look forward to the day when D1 institutions pick up flag football for the mere opportunity of scholarships. D1 schools, all these men, the KU football players, they're doing a great job. But they dream of football just like a lot of my players did too, right down the road with 3 national championships. And they don't get the NIL deals. We have a receiver that averages a lot more yards than some of the top receivers in the D1 game. And not near the opportunities. I watch Utah getting trucks for their whole football team. I've reached out to scooter play. I can't even get scooters. So I would love to, in 5-10 years, I really hope the game's advanced so these players coming out of high school have every college at their fingertips, not just 15. So that's my dream, and the Olympics.
That's great. We'll set our clocks on that one.
Yeah, LA. I hope you guys are there.
We have time for a couple more questions. All right, back here. And then we'll take one more.
Thank you so much for being here and talking to us. In Kansas and across the nation, we've had many bills passed against transgenders participating in sports, and the SB 180 that passed in Kansas restricted down to elementary, high school, college. Have you had any experience dealing with this, and what are your views on it?
Yeah, I know this is a topic that there's a lot of different viewpoints. I'll give you my viewpoint. So I know that, let's imagine a young boy that is born biologically a boy, but just never feels right in his body, right? He's not letting everyone know that, I really feel like I'm a girl. He's not doing that to take advantage of women's sports. Let's be real. First of all, why would you leave the men's game to go to a game that's not respected? Why would you do that just to win a competition? There are more battles that these people are facing every single day than if they win a swim meet. And we want to talk about competitive advantages, right? A lot of people, they have a competitive advantage. Let's talk about the kids that had private lessons from the moment that they were this big. If we want to talk about competitive advantages, do we want to put them in their own league? Because to me, that's not fair, that some kids will grow up with nothing, with no training on how to throw a ball, how to shoot a ball. But we, all of a sudden, a lot of the people who talk about this bill, the one thing that irks me, and I would love to talk to anyone respectfully about this, but one thing that really bothers me is that a lot of these people who bring up this trans athlete situation have never once cared about moving the women's game forward. Never once have talked about protecting women's sports. If we want to talk about what we can do for women's sports, Why are we limiting more people? Why are we not talking about media? Why are we not talking about funding? Why are we not talking about the opportunities that are lacking? Why are we using this idea that we're protecting women's sports when we all know that's not the case? And so for me, I would rather die knowing that I was maybe too accepting of a trans athlete because it provided them a chance to play. And we grow up saying winning is not all that matters. So why is winning all we're focused on if a trans athlete wins? Because sports, we know winning is not what we get out of sports. It's building, it's working with other people, it's learning about people that grew up differently than you and how can you work with them. So for me, it's a no-brainer, and I would love to listen to other viewpoints, but I know that for me, when I err on love, if my nephew happens to come out as transgender, or if you have a sibling, do you want them to be excluded in an already extremely tough world? Because I know no one picks that. I didn't choose to be gay. I know a lot of people might think that. Like, I'm telling you, it's like if you agree with arranged marriages, that's how I would have been marrying a man. And I'm telling you, life would have been so much easier had I been straight. So I know that these trans athletes, them participating in sports is maybe one of the bright parts of their life where they can just be. And now we're trying to take that away as well. And so I hope that that's something that is a non-issue when it comes to talking about women in sports, because there are much bigger issues when it comes to growing the game.
Thank you, Katie. Any last questions? One more. It's fallen silent. Katie, thank you so much for sharing your story and your perspective with us. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. When's your next talk? I feel like we really, first female director, that's huge. I'm going to make a news article, and then once it's not a news article, we'll
Thanks, Katie. Thank you all so much for joining us for our Elizabeth Dole Women in Leadership lecture tonight. On December 7th, we have an afternoon program with the Fort Leavenworth, our Fort Leavenworth series, last one of the season. War in the Asiatic Pacific Theater. That's on December 7th at 3 o'clock. So this wraps up our season. Thank you so much. Have a great holiday weekend and holiday season, and good luck, students, on your finals.
Ooh, finals. Is that this week?
Coming up.